We are here in Taipei at RightsCon, the leading summit on human rights in the digital age. And with us now is David Kaye. He is a clinical professor of law at the University of California, where he teaches international human rights law and international humanitarian law. David works at the intersection of technology, freedom of speech, and democratic deliberation. He was also the UN Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of the right to freedom of opinion and expression up until 2020. David, thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
it's a real honor for us to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
And you're quite the hero at RightsCon, I understand from various people I'm talking to, upholding the legal processes in the face of so many human rights abuses. I'm wondering, how difficult is that at the moment when the law is under attack from on so many fronts, especially in the US? How difficult is it to uphold those processes in especially when the courts are so dominated by Republicans at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. I think first off, let me just say thank you for including me on this. And there's one little thing I want to say, like you say, hero or whatever. So my, I don't know that that's actually true, but I've actually been saying to people, because people remember, people talk often about like, how many rights cons have you been to? And I remember my first one was in Manila in 2015.
Yeah.
And that was sort of the end of my first year of being special rapporteur, which actually started like at the very first week meeting with Brett and Peter, like in the Access Now team. And early on, I decided that my first report to the Human Rights Council was going to be on encryption. And I actually kind of launched it or rolled it out at RightsCon in Manila. And I remember at the time, people sort of like, in a way, almost like their minds being blown that this seemingly technical issue that, from my perspective, was so much a freedom of expression and privacy issue, like that a UN person would kind of tackle it. And so I think it kind of goes back to that in a way. And I've always felt that the RightsCon community and the Access Now community, that we're just very simpatico, like we're very much on the same page.
Can I quickly respond to that? Because just to say that report that you put out was like it was seminal in so many ways, because it was also a validation for us, because we had this like representative of the UN or a UN official, who was like acknowledging that like his first report wasn't going to be about, all the traditional things that it could have been. It was like, I'm going to focus on encryption. And we were all cheering because it gave us official validation. It gave us text. It gave us language that we could refer to that wasn't like just these crazy, geeks on the side.
Right.
And so thank you to you for that. And another, reason why you have got hero status.
Yeah.
So can we come back to that?
But it can connect to your question, which is, so I think that for Americans right now, there's a bit of a shock moment, right? And the shock is, which, for people who've been following this for a while, there's not too much of a shock. I mean, this has been a slow burn, Republican control of the Supreme Court, for example, the overturning of Roe versus Wade, the sort of this, idea that the president of the United States can't be held accountable for criminal law violations in Trump v. US. So there's been a slow moving process of, I think, certainly human rights and civil rights defenders feeling that the rule of law is inaccessible to us in a lot of ways. But of course, at the same time, like you've had a human rights defender from Tunisia or from anywhere else around the world, or you look around the room, there are a lot of people here who've lived in these environments for a long time. Yeah. And so in a certain way, there's nothing new about it, right? There's sort of, it's been a long process of kind of authoritarianization of civic space, and I think there's just a continuation. I think the real challenge for us is like, how do we not just fight back, but how do we maintain our sanity and our ability to keep pushing? That's to me, that's a big question at the moment.
Because America hasn't really had a coup before, and that's what this basically is. I know that you've skeeted, I think,
Yeah,
on Blue
right,
Sky,
skeeting.
saying that it's actually mindless pillage that's going on in the
It
country
is
right
there.
now.
Yeah, there's something about it that is it's more.
It's dumber than a coup.
Yeah, right. It's got this kind of stupid quality to it. But so on the one hand, I think it's designed to destroy as a prelude to something worse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
What is that?
and that's the question. I mean, is the something worse could be a couple of different things. I mean, one is just pure corruption and kleptocracy. So, from the perspective of Elon Musk, like destroying the ability of the administrative state to monitor SpaceX or Tesla or X even, that's a benefit. That's like a real financial benefit to him. Or destroying USAID, like that's a gift to China, where he's trying. I mean, I was just reading in the paper this morning, not actual paper,
No.
of course, because
That's
we're in
what
the
we still
digital
call
age.
it, though.
We still call it, but like that he
Unless
is
it's a
getting
Saturday
access.
morning, in which case I do actually. Still
Actually,
buy
we
the
do.
new-
We get the actual paper.
You get the
Yeah,
paper.
my
There's still a
finger-
thrill, isn't there?
I
to
love,
the
I
actual
love the
ink.
newspaper. I love the newspaper. But yeah, so there's the kind of the corruption and kleptocracy part of it, which I think is very much relevant. But then there's the the direct like use of law enforcement tools, which we already see in like the AP being denied access to
I
the
was
White
going
House and
to
things like
bring
that.
that up.
Yeah, and that's just tip of the iceberg in terms
Yeah.
of like this so-called free speech administration basically using tools to undermine access to information and freedom of expression. And so those things are happening, kind of in parallel with one another. It's like destruction, but also
Yeah.
I think there's looming repression.
So the Associated Press, just for people who don't know, was removed from the White House because it refused to acknowledge Trump's decision to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Like Google accepted that, and on Google Maps, it's now called the Gulf of America.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what are the impacts on tech reporting now?
Yeah.
That has happened.
And language.
Yeah, it's right. It's everything. It's like, right. It's sort of like that part of it is just, I mean, there's certain words that we abuse, like Kafkaesque or Orwellian, but the whole Gulf of America thing is just, it is Orwellian.
Yeah,
right?
we have a copy of 1984 with us.
Oh, really? Yeah, you just carry it around.
Yeah, it's like our Bible. It's like this
I
is.
just finished it.
Yeah, I mean, it was written in 1948 or 49, and it just seems to be the world we're living in now.
Oh yeah, I know. I reread 1984 every so often, but but think
I'm in
about
good
all
company, I can tell.
We're going to get you to sign it, by the way.
Yeah, right. Well, but think about all of the elements of it that are. So there's the doublespeak part of it, but there's also the memory hole part of it. So a lot of government websites went down. Government research is being pulled down. So actual scientific progress, so information that should be available to not just Americans, but to the scientific community worldwide. And the footnote, I could say, the freedom of expression is regardless of frontiers. Yeah. So it's a denial of this right of access to information around the world. And that's the memory hole, basically. Yeah. So a lot of this is happening in ways that, like, you wouldn't have thought that, like, this fiction could be made reality so quickly. Yeah. I mean, it obviously has. And that's like going back to like a lot of people in this conference have experienced that already.
They have, and we've heard that, and it's not even historical, it's like current. Like you hear like new cybercrime laws being passed and rolled out in Tunisia. You hear of I mean, we're going to speak to some Tibetans later on, like what they're experiencing in terms of the decision by the PRC to choose one Tibetan language out of 35, and that is now the only Tibetan language, if at all, if it's taught in schools. So there seems to be, like, do you think when we think about authoritarianism, which feels to be like the authoritarianism and conflict, the two sort of defining terms of this era in a way, like where does the digital fit into it? Like how do you see digital enabling digital authoritarianism? How do you see digital and conflict, like what's going on here that and of course there's the role of Silicon Valley, but not only Silicon Valley, the corporatized tech sector.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on here? To help us to understand and sort of unpack this.
Yeah, that's
Please.
a great, big, huge question. It goes to your question too about sort of the impact on tech and digital. Again, this is an area where I don't know, for a lot of people around the world, going back maybe 10 or 15 years, the whole tech story was one of progress and openness and democratization of speech and all of that. And obviously there were voices back then, some who were very much a part of the RightsCon community, were saying, whoa, wait a second. And I think those cautionary voices are the ones that have been correct, in the sense that, unfortunately, I mean, alongside the repression has been explosions of connection. Absolutely. I mean, this is an example, but the governmental use, the corporate and the corporatization and the concentration of power in a few companies. I mean, there's certainly on the over the top, layer platforms, but all of that has been a process of like ultimately making it a more restrictive internet, or at least a little bit more of a dangerous time for technology. And yeah, I mean, we could go on and on about like the different ways that has unfolded, but I think maybe the core issue, even apart from like specific technology questions, is just this overwhelming concentration of power, right? This, and Tim Wu talked about the curse of bigness a few years ago in a book, and that is right. I mean, we ignored, and maybe this is sort of a community, we share some of this burden, is that we focused on some of the outcomes as we had to, but we didn't. It took a while to get to the place of looking at power. And ultimately, a lot of this is just about power, concentrations of wealth, and all that. And, that's, I don't know how we confront that today. And for activists, it's hard to know, too.
Yeah, I mean, is there a path back?
Yeah.
Or is the genie out of the bottle? Is there a path back to more local connection?
I think there is. I mean, I do think, I think there is I'm not a silver lining person at all. Like but I do think there's been a wake up call.
It's just a cloud.
Yeah, but right, exactly. Just a cloud. There's nothing, right? No metaphors here. But I do think, I think there's the possibility that people are, I almost want to say woke, but they've been waking up to the danger of power, the danger of, somebody like Elon Musk, even if it were a benign person, being involved in policymaking to that extent. It's not even policymaking, really. It's just the raw exercise of power. People have woken up to that.
Showmanship with a chainsaw.
But so now the issue is exactly, I mean, it was like a chainsaw this week, when he walked into Twitter, it was a toilet. Right, or sink.
Before that, it was a Nazi salute.
Yeah, and not right, exactly. So there's a couple of things there. Like, so one is, I think,
it's okay, we've got another hour or two.
Yeah,
we're extending the time on this.
Right, I don't know, but I think like one issue is, so maybe on the hopeful side is that maybe activists and academics and others, maybe they see that it's all about power, and so we need to figure out a way, not just to argue for this legislative change and that legislative change, but actually how do we build political power? Like how do you win in a democracy? How do you win votes? So that, I think, human rights activists have, I think, been wary of that for a long time, but we need to be a part of we need to get our hands dirty in a way that maybe, I think a lot of people here do already. I mean, there are a lot of people, but maybe just think about the American sort of part of it. Maybe we need to think more about like, how do we win votes? How do we get power? How do we change the, sort of the balance of power in Washington? Or sort of, how do we go to,
I'm just thinking about door knocking.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm just thinking it's house to house combat.
Yeah, some of that is, but some of it is very localized. I think so. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, which, we have room to do some of this work in California.
Yeah.
So maybe some of it is sort of going back, and maybe, if you think about how the Republicans really gained power, it was not through marching through the street.
No.
It was through this long process of basically taking over, like school boards to city councils to all of that, and we need to do the same. Now, a lot of people have been talking about that. That's, I mean, I think one part, and then like the Nazi salute thing, to me is like it's been very depressing, I think, to see people who know better not standing up.
Oh, okay,
right?
That's interesting.
Right, so
that's concerning.
Right, there's been a lot of on the corporate side, whether it's
why you not say nothing.
Yeah. Why are you quiet? Why are you lining up at the inauguration when you actually know what's going to happen? Just because it's like in your shareholders' interest? Like, is it really in your shareholders' interest to have this? Is it really in like an unstable democracy? Is that in your business interest? No, it's like lining their pockets in a way. So yeah, I think that there's that element also of like, how come there was no accountability for Musk doing a Nazi salute? Like everybody knew what it was, except maybe the ADL, but it's
and how do you, because I was thinking about that Nazi salute a lot, and this whole idea about whether it's anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or like anti-LGBT. Apparently the Stonewall Monument was now LGB because they don't want like T and Q in there. So I'm now a member of the LGB community. That when we were talking about language before, like this is the craziness of it. But it's this whole idea of the persecution or the other. This constant marginalization. Like our electoral success depends on our ability to be able to demonize trans kids or demonize the migrants coming across borders. And I think that when as an academic and as a advocate, if I may, like having voices like yours and colleagues who are prepared to speak and are prepared to write and are prepared to squeak skeet on blue sky,
exactly,
essential because because leadership requires leaders as well as movements.
I think that's right. But it also, like, mentioning specific vulnerable communities right now. So the attack on the trans community is like, I'm not sure. Obviously we've been attacking, like in the United States and in Europe, migrants, immigrants, asylum seekers, minorities for a long time. But this attack on trans people it's sort of
targeted.
It's so targeted. It's so cruel. It's so contrary to fundamental values. Like, it's one thing to have a debate. Like, we could be honest about, like, okay, there should be a debate about participation in sports, blah, blah, blah. But this has become this kind of, which I think is a stupid debate, by the way. Anyway, but it has morphed into this inhumane denial of like existence, essentially. And so
difference.
Right? So it's a real transformation. I think there's a real need to push back on that. And we have to find ways to do that.
Give us in our final minute. I know you're not a silver lining guy, but like,
maybe I'm lying about that.
I think you are.
I'm sort of like hope-free rather than hopeful.
Yeah, Nell's taking a hope-free approach to it, which is like,
it's kind of empowering. I find.
But what do you got? Like, what are you seeing in, like, what's this new generation of kids like coming through who are writing their essays on ChatGPT and delivering them to you as original and thought, no, but what is there like? Is there? I mean, there's obviously. Or anywhere, like, where are you seeing something when you can go, that's where I'm going to put my time and investment?
Yeah, I was talking about this with somebody else who has children like me in their 20s, and how some of these debates and the language policing for them is so odd in a way, because there's a way in which young people, I don't want to be patronizing at all, but young people, it's like the reverse of that. They get it in ways that older people don't. Like even with my own kids, like even discussions around pronouns, like to them it's weird that it's even a conversation, it's like they just do it. It's just like people are who they are. And so I'm like, that part to me is really pretty hopeful. I feel good about that side of things.
I mean, I think that's true. Like, there are positive shifts that have happened, and I think that how do we continue to acknowledge them and invest in them? Because like unless we have a counterbalance to all of this stuff that's going on, it's not just in the US, it's everywhere, where we're going to be in the cloud.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No, and I think there's room for, and especially if you think about movements over the last couple of years, whether it's labor or, trans rights or Black Lives Matter, environment, like there's, so the silver lining is there's still a ton of energy.
Yes.
And so maybe in the moment there's a shock at like the level of repression from the Trump administration, but there will be a regrouping.
Yes.
I think there's like too many tens of millions of people who believe in that. So
Viva the regrouping.
Yes, right. It's
David
not just resistance, but regrouping.
Yeah, thank you so much
Thanks,
for your
David.
insights.
Thank
It's
you.
been
My pleasure.
a pleasure.
It was a lot of fun.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Very
you're.
nice to talk to you.
I'm
going to go over there and press stop, even though I got it.
You got it.
There we go.
I know, just because I